You are listening to the Love Makes a Way podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Hoffman, founder and president of Life Options Network. On this podcast, we will discuss overcoming through Christ and how we as the church can create a culture of life. I look forward to having you with me today.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Makes a Way. I am here today with really a good friend, somebody who we've been friends for years and actually grew up together. Annalise Lang, who I just have immense respect for her legal career. She is a top-rated attorney practicing currently in the Fort Worth, Texas area. After completing undergraduate studies, Annalise attended law school at Regent University School of Law. She earned a Juris Doctor degree in 2012. Annalise spent a decade working in family law in the state of Oregon and is known for her outstanding work and commitment to the legal profession. Currently, Annalise represents clients with estate planning and probate issues. Today, she lives in Texas with her husband, John, and 2 boys. Hi, friend.
Hi, it's so good to see you. It's been way too long, and I guess these are the circumstances that we talk under now.
It is. It is. You moved to Texas. I moved to Tennessee. It's a whole new world for both of us. It's amazing, though. I miss our dinners, though. We used to go do dinners, and it was so fun to just amazing family talk with you guys. So you've moved into probate and estate law, but you spent a decade in family law. And I got to, see you a little bit in that season and just watch as you really fought for children in that process. And I know that there was probably all kinds of cases that were pretty intense in the state of Oregon, especially with some of the laws that you likely encountered there. But before we get into all that, what even led you to get into family law to start?
Well, I was post-college working and volunteering at the church for young girls and leading a small group with not just any young girls. I wanted to specifically work with the troubled young girls. And so I was doing that. And then I had coaching volleyball and basketball and through those things. And then also just seeing my parents serve in the single parents group and celebrate recovery at the church, it stirred something in me to want to be able to help the families who were suffering, single parents who were suffering in a very practical way. So not just providing emotional support, but also making sure that I could provide some type of practical support. And I saw some different situations through coaching young kids too that needed to be reported, just different situations and scenarios that came up where I would have liked to have helped in a different kind of way. And so that ultimately is what led me to attend law school. My plan was to become a family law attorney. A lot of people go to law school and they don't know yet exactly what they want to do, but that was my plan. And upon graduating and after interning at a family law firm, I got a job as a family law attorney. And a couple of days after I was sworn in and received my bar number, I was in court dealing with a domestic violence matter. And so it all happened very, very quickly, but there were multiple times when I knew this is certainly what I'm supposed to be doing. So it was difficult to get started in that world and be in the Oregon court, be thrust into the Oregon court system. But I also throughout that had a piece that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, all of the hard work in law school, passing the bar exam, it's all been worth it. I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's amazing. So, wow, domestic violence, day one, that's intense. So were you expecting that to be kind of, was there a warning, I guess, that you'd be jumping right into something that intense? Okay.
Yeah, my mentor was so busy, and I knew that that was the type of work that was going to be involved. And she was so busy that she handed me a stack of files and mentored me along the way, but she was overwhelmed and I wanted to work for her. And so I made myself a resource for her. And I also knew that I needed to learn very, very quickly because
Sure.
nobody would have time to micromanage me. And that was fine. I didn't mind being put into the mix and having that pressure to learn quickly. And I think that really helped me become a better litigator and trial attorney more quickly as well.
Absolutely. So you're working in the state of Oregon. Do you feel like in representing children, moms, which obviously at Life Options Network, that's the number one demographic we work with as well, and we're always looking to, and obviously we don't give legal advice as an organization, but we are looking to give proper referrals and tell people the best advice possible. But in your practice, did you feel like the Oregon laws and statutes protected children? Was that something you felt like they were doing fairly well, or no?
I do think, and there are two contexts. So there's the family law context in family court, and then there's the juvenile law context in juvenile court. And this is the Oregon court system. And so when talking about the family court system, I do think that there are a lot of resources that are in place to help people in domestic violence situations and also protect children in emergency situations as well. So there's been a lot of work in the different counties in Oregon to make sure a lot of different scenarios can be addressed right away when there's husband and wife involved, spouses involved, but also just people who have a child together. So if somebody is a single mom and the dad is doing things he shouldn't be doing, she would be able to qualify to file certain documents to keep him away for a time to protect her child. And that's the family court system. And there has to be some type of relationship there for certain domestic violence petitions to be able to be used by a person who's being abused or a past relationship. But I do think that the laws in Oregon and family court have done a good job to help people be able to go in immediately and use court resources to protect themselves and their children. The juvenile court system is a little bit of a different story, and it's a different posture as well. So in the juvenile court system, it's supposed to protect kids, but part of my job when I was working in juvenile court was to protect parents from the state infringing upon their rights as parents. Now, I actually view that as protecting kids because it's to the greatest extent possible best for kids to be with their parents. And we want to help parents do well so that they can keep their kids.
Yeah.
And so that was in the juvenile context. The state has gotten involved and possibly removed someone's child. And so that's the difference with the family law context. It's usually parent against parent or a domestic violence situation, not even involving kids. So in the juvenile court context, there are a lot of issues. It's probably like this in most states. It's not a good system. CPS gets involved, disrupts someone's life, and then a parent and a child are stuck in that system through a series of different types of hearings, shelter hearings, and it goes on, and it's very difficult to get out of that system. And so when there are potentially social workers who aren't trained in the way they should be, that person could inadvertently involve a family that the state should have never been involved with. And it can follow that parent around or that child around for a long time. Sometimes it involves the child going to foster care when the child should not have. And so that's probably less about the laws in juvenile court and more about training, bias. I mean, there are different things that can be involved, but we have a constitutional right as parents to be able to raise our kids and in the way that we think they should be raised. And so I do think for the juvenile court and juvenile law context, because we have a constitutional right to direct the care and upbringing and education of our kids, that there should be more care that has gone into making sure people are properly and extensively trained before they can just walk in and remove someone's child.
Right.
So I didn't go into my first year as an attorney knowing that was an issue, and that's something that I learned over time and have been very disappointed in. And so there's a lot of work to be done on the state's end to improve the people who are going to be involved with potentially removing kids. And one example, this was a crossover with family court and juvenile court, but one example is an extensive 4-year case that I had, constant litigation, started in family court. CPS got involved, and the judge and I, the family court judge, who had been a juvenile court judge, and I knew that the child had been abused. We had pictures, and it ended up being the grandmother, actually, and we didn't think it was the mom. I represented the dad. We knew it wasn't the dad. No one was accusing him of it. But we had to have a big, expensive trial and had to cross-examine the CPS worker who still tried to stand her ground on it. And the judge came down on her pretty hard and said, after being a juvenile court judge for years, all I have to do is look at these pictures and I know what happened.
Wow.
And so that's one of many examples where there was proper intervention, even though it wasn't the parents. We needed to make sure the grandmother couldn't be around the child and the mom was protecting the child from the grandmother. But disappointing that caseworkers have a lot of control.
Yeah.
And a lot of judges just go with what the caseworker says. So thankfully, this judge did his job and saw through that, but they're given quite a bit of leeway.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because one of the things we are recognizing with our free stores is the need for moms who get their kids back to have access to items and supplies and support. And even just coming around women when they are in a tough financial space, when they are facing really hard situations. And recognizing, one of my big passions is that we're going to get the church to move on supporting women and families that are really struggling, so that hopefully, we go and we teach and we show them, that God loves them, that they have a purpose, and that we can be with them in this process of needing help for a season. And it usually is just a season. But how much less potentially there would be if all of us began to walk alongside women in these places, of children going to foster care, of women feeling like they had nowhere to turn except for the legal system. Not to say that there aren't absolutely times, if there's abuse or anything involved, that we want to involve the legal system. But, just getting to that place where we're connecting with people before hopefully it gets to that point, is one of our goals. But no, that's intense, is this kind of inner connection with CPS and just all of the things that you must have been moderately frustrated with. Because I do think that, our children, they don't have a voice. They don't have, as a lawyer, that's essentially what you were having to do, is stand in that place and say, yeah, these are the things that are happening, and try to get the best thing going for them. So when you saw a child that was being abused, those types of things, what was it that woman did? What do you recommend to a mom who is maybe seeing something, or another family member who's seeing abuse? What would you tell them to do to protect themselves and their child, should they see something going on in their family or even with a friendship or neighbor or whatever that needs addressing? What would you do as a lawyer in family law?
Well, and just to comment too on what you were just talking about with the church, so one issue is neglect. It's not always just abuse. Kids can be removed for neglect or perceived neglect. And so my church here in Texas, I won't go to a church that doesn't actively support single moms. And I think we're called to that: widows, orphans, single parents, not just single moms, single parents. And so our church does such a good job welcoming in all single parents, but providing for their basic needs and helping them to be successful. I mean, being a parent with a spouse is hard. There are two people and it's still hard. Imagine doing it all on your own. And so our churches have, I think, an obligation and to be involved and help provide for those needs, because parents can get kids taken away due to neglect.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't have the financial resources or help or other support and don't know what to do. And I think many of us, if we could put ourselves in the situation that many of these, I'm thinking particularly of moms are in, pregnant moms, they're trying to figure out what to do. And if we put ourselves in that situation, I don't know that we would all do very well. It's easy to sit back and look at someone's situation and judge it, but neglect is a big part of why kids get removed. And so churches need to get more involved. There needs to not be a judgment there. They need to get more involved. They need to get involved in the community, but specifically to help come around and support single moms and not have them feel ostracized for some reason. And that's my clients who had church support fared much better throughout the process. And that went for family law cases and juvenile cases. And when they had a church family supporting them, it was a much easier process. Already difficult, but better than it could have been.
Absolutely. I mean, that's telling right there, that the clients that you had connected to the church. I just really want to repeat that, because I think people minimize sometimes the impact of walking alongside people, but it reflects on the day-to-day culture, what the church does or does not do, and how they're willing to go about that. So that's very, very telling. Wow.
Well, Proverbs 31 says that we are to defend the poor and needy and speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And so I know that's probably a guiding verse for you, Jenny, just based on everything that I've seen you do over the years and making sure that you're helping people who don't otherwise have a way to help themselves. But that's in the Bible. And so churches need to step up and do that, help the poor and needy, also help single parents, and make sure that they're actively providing supports for them.
Well, and it's interesting too. I always go to Psalms 10, where David's talking about the devourer, how basically if we're not taking care of the poor and needy, that there's a devourer who he's looking for, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, the easy target. And so if we're not protecting those people, the vulnerable in society, there's systems that are looking to take advantage of them. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy reality that I think some of us have been so removed from. If you grew up in church, you had a good family, whatever, not that any family is perfect. It is easy to kind of just do life. And yet in the meantime, there's a lot of death happening. There's a lot of, broken families. So no, I could not say that anymore. It's such an important part. So with the legal system, then would that be what you would change, is how CPS deals with juvenile court specifically, or is there anything else that would stand out to you?
Yes, that's the main. There have been a lot of mostly attorneys who volunteered, at least in Oregon, to improve the laws related to family law and the procedures and processes. There have been many attorneys over the years who've become involved in that process, and that I was able to walk into and have a lot of these things already in place, which I appreciate those who have come along the way to help with legislation, but even just local court procedures. But in juvenile court, there should be more that goes into a situation, whether that's involving a supervisor or someone on an even higher level. They're all just overwhelmed with cases, but it's still not an excuse to improperly remove a child. And so there just needs to be more of a process or procedure or training in place before that happens. And it's not just going in front of a judge. There's something called a shelter hearing that does happen quickly. So somebody has an opportunity to get before a judge, but parents aren't properly represented, typically are not properly represented at that hearing. They don't know their rights. And they're doing tests that they don't know, that they don't need to do. They're involving the state psychologist, not knowing that they don't necessarily need to meet with that person. And so parents need to better understand their rights. When they get arrested, people understand their rights. They have to be told what their rights are, and they have the right to speak with an attorney. It's one of them. Well, I think it needs to be similar in this scenario, because parents will sometimes, when I would come into the picture, they'd already disclosed all sorts of things that they didn't need to disclose and weren't relevant, but were used against them later. So that would be another thing that I think needs to improve, is just making sure parents understand their rights. Some of them would call me right away. DHS called, should I talk to them? And then have them call me, and they don't like to call me or other private attorneys. They don't want us involved because it makes it harder for them, as it should. There needs to be that accountability there. But a lot of parents think if I don't cooperate with them right away, let them talk to my kid and all these things, then they're going to look at me as if I'm doing something wrong. So there needs to be more information provided to the parent up front about what they have a right to do or should do. Even if they don't have a right to, maybe they should do that. And that's something I want to make sure is said on here too, because I had a lot of vulnerable single mom clients, and DHS was way too involved in their life. And they just thought, this person's here to help me. And that's not the kind of social worker who's here to help them. There are other resources for that.
Yes.
People who can help them get food stamps and housing. And that's a different type of resource.
Yeah.
It's okay to involve that type of resource. And so I think I'm hoping your listeners will know to give it a second thought before thinking the state is on their side, because they're not when getting involved.
No, it's a challenge, because there's a lot of people that's their mindset, that the government, the state, they're out to support. And in so many ways, it's just a system of confusing laws that if people don't have the information, it's going to work against them. So, as an advocate for moms in need, it's that would be something I'd almost be wanting to lobby for, because it sounds like something that just absolutely is needed. Because again, that's the getting taken advantage of within culture, and it's rough. So you touched on it a little bit earlier with faith and being a Christian. So with your journey, you've seen all kinds of things. How has your faith in the Lord helped you work through some of the challenges in what you do, and I guess strengthened you in your journey as a lawyer?
Yeah, I've grown as a person and in my faith along the way, for sure. I mean, there were multiple dark moments where I just was deep in a particularly terrible case, and just a lot to prepare and make sure everything was in order. But just the heaviness of all the details that I've had to know about and hear about along the way, the trauma. There's something called compassion fatigue or secondary trauma, and that's hearing about all of these different difficult situations for so many years has affected me. But I do think that God did help me compartmentalize. He gave me a picture at one point of him. Just the load felt so heavy, the burden felt so heavy, and we are to share one another's burdens. But I really just, and feeling a little bit alone in my workload and all that I was responsible for, and the weight of what's going to happen with the children and my client, and that's on me. God did give me a picture of him helping me carry the burden, walking beside me, and you probably felt like this at times too, not removing the burden, and burdens can incite people to action. So not removing it, but gave me a picture of him walking beside me to lift up that burden with me. And so that really stayed with me. I'm not alone in this. It's not going to feel good all the time because it's tough work, but I'm not alone in it. So that really helped me. And then also just finding the balance in how do I be tough in litigation and on people that I'm questioning and dealing with, while also making sure that I'm serving the Lord in my actions and how I'm speaking and treating people. And that's a fine line, because I had to be tough in this job. And so I just would pray about certain lines of questioning that I knew that I probably had to do in order to most effectively represent my clients. And I had a few instances before we moved where I had to come down pretty hard actually on a mom, because the child needed to be in a better situation, was with the dad and his family in that situation. And so I really didn't want to, and we were going into the last day of trial, and I just knew that I had to do this line of questioning that was going to be really tough. And we ended up winning, but it was very, very close, the judge said, but he knew it was about what was best for the child. But I really was thoughtful and careful before I did that, because I had learned along the way to, when I'm doing a certain line of questioning and being tough on a parent, is it because this person is driving me crazy because I've been hearing all these bad things about them for 8 months and they're maybe not a good person.
Sure.
But that's not a good reason. And so just trying to sort out all of that and make sure that I'm being tough but kind. And I know that God did give me the ability to use my words in a certain way when I need to. And so just making sure I'm keeping all of that in line with the fruits of the Spirit.
I can imagine that would be very hard when you see injustice. And
Yes,
absolutely. No, well, you're a phenomenal friend. Well, to end our time, do you have a story that just you felt like was the most, highlight of your career? Anything that you saw happen that was just a big win for you in the legal process for kids?
I have about probably five cases that I know for sure, though just the way that they fell into my lap, that I was supposed to be involved with that family or with that particular client. And so a couple of them, one in particular was one of my first cases was against the state of Oregon, because they were trying to remove my client's son from her care and terminate her parental rights. So it had gone on for a number of years. She was immersed in that system that I was telling you about. We had everybody against us. It was me and her on one side, and then the DA, the child's attorney, the couple of caseworkers that had been involved, foster parents were there. It was me and her, and it was a 14-day trial it was in Portland, Oregon. And we ended up, I actually took it pro bono, and we ended up winning. And everybody was shocked. A judge told me and my client before we started that she should just settle, which meant that she would be agreeing to terminate her parental rights. And that's what I asked the judge. I said, is that what you mean by settle? And she said, yes. And so we said, no, why would we not then go in and try to fight this? And so my former law partner and I still talk about this case every once in a while. I was in my first year and having this big of a trial and still figuring out Oregon evidence laws, just all it is, very complex. And going in and being able to do this, I know that I was supposed to take that case and help that mom. And I had a couple other ones, though, recently. I had probably 3 relocation cases just in my 10 years. 2 of them came after my husband and I had decided we were going to relocate to raise our kids in a different area. We just, as much as we love Oregon, did not think it was the best place for us to raise our children at that time. And so when we made that decision, I suddenly had 2 relocation cases where there were just a lot of things going on in the schools, the public schools in Oregon, that a lot of parents were unhappy with and didn't want their kids exposed to. And these weren't things being challenged. They were already implemented and happening there. And so I was able to have a couple of pretty big trials that we ended up winning. This is right before we moved, where the kids were able to move and be raised somewhere else, to move out of Oregon. And the judge actually agreed in both cases with the evidence and agreed that Oregon was not quite the same as it used to be, and let the parents make that decision. And so those are the ones that stand out. But that trial against the state defending this mom who had no other options and just horrible childhood, just problems compiling on her all these years, just feeling hopeless, and being able to help her. Sometimes it isn't even just about the outcome. It's about making sure, I viewed my job to also make sure that people felt like they were being defended. So not staying quiet. Sometimes I would speak up to the judge just so my client felt heard, even if I knew it wouldn't affect the outcome, just making sure that my client felt defended and heard. And that's a big part of my job too. But yeah, those are some of the ones that stand out. And I know you did mention what could people do if they're in a situation or potential situation that they need to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very important. I want to make sure I at least touch on that.
Yeah.
And have a couple of things. One is to just make sure that they know where their local court is, and there's almost all courts are going to have a domestic relations counter. And those people most of them are so good at helping people who are pro se. What that means is not represented by an attorney. And there are a lot of resources. So finding out the resources in the county, but having them familiarize themselves with the options and the forms available to them in their county to address potential domestic violence or emergency custody situations. And a lot of the people at the domestic relations counter are very kind and helpful in completing the forms. They can't give legal advice, but completing the forms and making sure, I can't emphasize this enough, but not ignoring. If someone thinks that the other parent is being abusive, address it, because I have seen where a parent wasn't acting as what the state calls a protective parent. Maybe they're scared to go to DHS. There could be any number of reasons why, but acting as the protective parent and not hesitating to address what's going on, because the risk there is the state coming in and saying this parent won't protect the child from the other parent, potentially removing the child. And so not being fearful, but going in, and information is power. So making sure that they know what their resources are that are available to them in the court system, and then not hesitating to address, and then get an attorney in your corner. There are a lot of pro bono attorneys, a lot of people who do free consultations as well. And so that's, having an attorney in your corner is a great thing to have, and important thing to have if needed. And it never hurts to consult with someone to get advice. That conversation is completely private.
Yes, so helpful. Absolutely. And we do have access to some attorneys at Life Options Network that we do connect our clients to. But yeah, thank you so much for your time today and always a privilege to hear from you, learn from you, and just what you do is phenomenal, and what you've done is phenomenal. So thank you guys again for being here on Love Makes a Way, and we will see you guys all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. If you would like to donate to Life Options Network to help mothers and their children, you can go to lifeoptionsnetwork.org/donate.